Well, hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast. I'm Tom Rennie. Great to be with you as ever on a podcast that's just gone top 20 in New Zealand. So great to be with you. Our friends out in New Zealand listening while I'm assuming surfing and or sheep farming. Alongside me for today's program is, of course, the legendary MLSer. And if he won any trophy in America, he gets to call himself world champion. It's Dunny, Brian Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm good. I am actually a trophy winner. I won the oldest. Let's see if you know what this is. I won the oldest tournament in the United States. Do you know what that is? Incorrect. It is the U.S. Open Cup. That was a turn I was not expecting. U.S. Open Cup. I won it with the Columbus Crew back in the day. And Lamar Hunt, who is the original owner of the Columbus Crew, who the trophy is named after the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup trophy. We won it at the stadium that Uncle Lamar built. Had a bunch of names. It was Crew Stadium. It's the old Crew Stadium, which I actually played in the very first game. Then I won it in front of Lamar.
I think we'll find.
Because it was the first quote-unquote soccer-specific stadium built for Major League Soccer. So, yes, I am a trophy winner. I have my medal. It's over there with the jersey. But I wasn't a world champ. Like, what are we doing here? Why is everybody's panties all tightened up right now?
Can we just mention this? Because I love this. I love this so much. Firstly, apparently I've got to do a sorry, Tim. That's the earliest beep we're ever going to get in the program because I can't do that joke, I'm being told. So fine. Sorry, Tim. Secondly, Noah Lyles. I don't know anything about Noah Lyles. I know nothing about athletics. I have no interest in who does the best at exercise. Just save it for the gym. There's no reason for cameras or crowds to be there, but whatever. But Noah Lyles' quote, which was, the thing that hurts me the most is that I have to watch the NBA finals and they have world champion on their head. What champion of what? Which he says amazingly. The United
Good personality.
States. The way he says it is just so good. It's so brilliantly delivered. I'm going to follow Noah from now on because I love him. And it's just amazing. It's one of those things, Danny. You've lived in American sport your entire life. I don't really like any American sports. Like I try and go the baseball, but when I tried to understand the baseball at the Yankees a couple of weeks ago, everyone got up and did the YMCA. And I thought, this ain't for me, Jack. And I've tried to watch NFL. I've been to NFL games, but it's just rubbish. And the basketball just is so unappealing to me because it just feels like repetition. It looks like someone trying to revise. Like it's very boring to me. But you can like what you like. But the whole thing about the Americans win American-only sports that only get played in America and call themselves world champs, baby. And he was like, yeah, in my lane today, there was or my race today, there was Ukrainians, Britons, Canadians, Trinidad and Tobagans, do another country, Nigerians, Ghanaians, and it's like, and Japanese people, and it's like, we took on the world, and like NBA people. I mean, you've been in America today; they lost their shit about this. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, it is a listen. Here in the States, we're great at basketball, right? We're good at baseball. We're good at the football, the hand throw. And then everything else gets a little murkier, right? The competition for worldwide recognition. But I get it. I've had this conversation. People have asked me, like, why do you call yourselves world champions when it's just the league is played in? We do the Olympics, and that's probably the world champion thing. We have the World Cup. That's the world champion thing. It's a little bit different. But Tom, we're sensitive. We're sensitive little folk sometimes. It's called soccer. We know we do this thing. So it's ridiculous. I loved what he said. Great personality, Cheshire Cat smile. He, I think, told a lot of truths, but we're a bit sensitive over here sometimes.
Noah, if you are listening to this podcast, top 20 in New Zealand, top 50 in America, feel free to become a West Ham fan. And if you're ever in East London, I'll find a way to get us into one of them boxes. I'll find a way. You're a top guy.
Really quick, I'm so glad you pointed that out because I would equate you and Max Bretos, or Tio Max, as we call him out here in the United States, as being West Ham fans in a very similar sensitivo phase right now.
We're broadly similar, yeah.
Yeah, well, you want to know why? Because literally all the West Ham fans, when you say something to them, literally this past weekend on Saturday, top of the table. Yes.
Talk your
sorry, Tim. Top of the table over here.
Sure.
Like, I had to hear you do it. I had
Mm.
to see you do it. And I had to listen to T.O. Max do it out here working on our Apple coverage of Major League Soccer. So I just be careful when you're throwing those barbs over there.
Yeah.
Top of
Yeah.
the table.
I mean, I always say to people, for years of doing, I've done the Premier League for 11 years and sport for 15 years and, Sirius for 5 years. I always say to people, don't look at the table until you're 10 games in. You might learn things, but you don't know what kind of season you're going to have at that point. Can I just say from now on, that right off? Sorry, Tim. Look at the table, guys, especially Saturday night around about 8 o'clock UK time. We'll get to that. I do want to talk about West Ham. I don't think it's great, and I actually think it's worth our time. But I don't want to do it top story today. I did want to talk a little bit about what happened in Liverpool Newcastle with you, because there's so many really interesting bits about Liverpool Newcastle this weekend, and I'd love, that's exactly where we should start with old Verge. Because Virgil van Dijk, I think it's fair to say Virgil van Dijk has lost a step. Okay, he has lost a step from what he was 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Is it the injury? Is it his age? Is it whatever? Virgil van Dijk is not the imperious Virgil van Dijk of 3 years ago. He's still probably, arguably, the best defender in the league, centre-half in his position, but he's clearly adapted his game to meet the demands of his body, right? So, that being said, he puts this tackle in. He gets a straight red card. I'd love your view on whether you think it is a straight red card. Personally, I think it's a great tackle, but we will see what you think about it, having played that role professionally. But also then, we are in an ecosystem now where all the players have been told directly and also indirectly by just watching matches in the first 3 weeks, don't talk to the ref disrespectfully, don't be either visibly disrespectful. You always describe covering your mouth and being able to say what you want, but they don't even want that anymore. They want you to toe the line. That's the ref. You are not. Give me no grief. And he was screaming at that referee who decided to send him off like a wife who just found out the husband had been banging the receptionist. What did you make to this whole Van Dijk scenario?
I wasn't expecting that analogy. I can promise you that. All right. So first off, let's acknowledge the injury against Everton a few years ago. With Pickford coming off his line, clattering into him, ACL tear. It's very, very, very hard for any athlete to get back to the level that they are in pre-injury. That is such a devastating type of injury. So I think when you're talking about elite of the elite, and we do this thing where we exalt athletes and then we tear them down. We put them on the pedestal and then we knock the legs out from underneath them. I still think Virgil van Dijk is one of the best center backs in the world currently and has been for the last couple of years. And the reason why I think we're so critical about our judgment of Virgil van Dijk was because of everything that he did in that season, 2-3 years ago. No one could dribble past him. He was untouchable in the air, scoring goals, left foot, right foot, pinging balls. His confidence level was through the roof. He was elite of the elite of the elite. The world-class conversation. He walked into, to your point, he walked into any team. It didn't matter the name. It didn't matter the crest. He walked into that team because he was better than what was there. So now when we watch and there's a mistake made, and especially when there's a critical mistake made, when I watch the buildup, is it a foul? Is it not foul? We're in this gray area now that whatever the referee's decision, it's not about the call being right or wrong. It's not about a subjective decision that we're looking at. It's very simply, is there a clear and obvious mistake in the decision that the referee's made? So if they don't make that call and they say it's a fair challenge, I don't think the referee is suggested by VAR to go to the monitor to overturn it, that there's a clear and obvious mistake. I think the same is to be said on the foul that's called, which obviously puts him in jeopardy because it's outside the penalty area. He's not making a quote unquote attempt to play the ball. If he is, if he isn't, and then the challenge itself, all these different variables, the last man. Where he gets caught is he gets caught on the wrong side. That's what ends up, when he's on the backside of the shoulder, every defender will tell you, goal side off the back shoulder, you're in big trouble if the attacking player gets you. So either way, listen, all we do is talk about VAR. I'm so sick and bored of it.
Yeah.
But we can talk about the reaction of the player. And I can speak from experience that there's some, we as fans and we watch the reaction of the players, we judge the reaction, right? Oh, he's wrong. Like he's lost it. He's lost. When you're talking about that level, when you're talking about the field, when you're in the stadium, nothing else matters. You don't hear the noise. You're aware of the noise. You don't hear the noise. You're aware of your coaches. You rarely hear the coaches. Like you're in this combative state of like kill or be killed, win or lose. And it's the highest level. And in a game like this against Newcastle, I don't think it's lost for a split second the size and the gravity of the game for Liverpool and for Newcastle, because these are the early stages of the season where everybody understands wins and losses, while they matter and they're relevant, and they don't matter and they're not really relevant because of the length of the season. There's still this egotistical conversation that you have to acknowledge with, we are going to win. We need to. We want to win. These players.
A lot of forgiveness here, mate. A lot of forgiveness for a week 3 game against Newcastle, getting in the ref space in that way.
No, you're misreading what I'm saying. I'm not justifying what I'm not justifying for a second what he did. I'm setting the tone for understanding that all this other bullshit around the game, sorry, Tim, doesn't matter. It's the game itself. And when something happens, players, you have players that can't control the emotion. And again, I'm not justifying. I'm telling you how a player gets to that point, because I've been in that point. When you feel like you've been done wrong, when you feel like you have no recourse, there's nothing, everything is out of your control, and you feel like this is a situation that is so passed over the line of being fair, you then you just see red mist, you see blood red, you can't control your emotions. And I could see him winding himself up in his mind. I could see how it was escalating. And I thought that maybe when he started to walk away, that he could walk off the field and walk away. But then you get that, and one more thing, blah, 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 blah. And one more thing, MFU. And then one more thing. And he couldn't stop. And then it got to the point where even with the fourth official, you see Klopp, and then you turn, and that's part of the guy who didn't make the correct call, who didn't overturn it, a guy who didn't correct what just happened. And MFU too. And then, so based on what we've seen from the referees to start the season and the mandate that's been handed down, if this is how they truly want the game to be managed, and if they want to make sure that how players verbalize themselves to the referee and how demonstrative they are towards the referee, if these are all yellow card bookings, well, then I would assume that they come down heavy-handed on Virgil van Dijk, not for the challenge, but for the actions post-challenge, because there's enough there to suggest that we could see a multi-game ban. If, and we see this every single year, we see this for the first 10 games of the season, these are the directives, these are the narratives, this is what we're going to do, yellow card, red card, point to the spot, penalty, and then all of a sudden it all goes away, right? About 10 games in. If they're serious about this, and they're serious about clamping down on the way that players act and react towards referees based on referee decisions, this is one of those moments where I would assume they would come down heavy-handed on Virgil van Dijk because of the way they started the season.
Well, look, I hope they do, frankly. I hope they do. We've got to a position now in football where at every level of the game, from the age that your boys play at, the age that my cousins play at, when I used to play kind of youth football in England, to the very top of the game, as we saw this weekend, and you don't get a great deal higher than Newcastle and Liverpool in the Premier League right now, the treatment of referees is utterly reprehensible. And we should be having discussions about wrong decisions, right decisions, improving refereeing, all that sort of stuff. And I don't want to do a full decision show this week because I want to talk about some of the football, but some of the decisions have been pretty diabolical. I don't agree with this particular decision. However, you cannot scream in an official's face in that way. The dissent has got out of hand, and we are maybe overcorrecting. Maybe that's what's required, because the trying to correct has not worked. And to that point, Dunny, a couple of stats for you from the first couple of weeks. 3 weekends into last season's Premier League, there were 3 bookings for dissent across the 30 games played. This year, 24 yellows for booking. Some second yellow, some not. In terms of time wasting, which we're not doing right here, 19 last season after 3 rounds. This season, 10 last time, 19 this time, so near doubled. So a huge amount. It's an 8 times increase in dissent. It's a double near increase for time wasting yellows. But that in itself is causing issues. The one we've discussed already with Virgil van Dijk. The other ones I wanted to raise to you here is that, and we'll do no more decisions after this. This weekend, there were 2 moments that I thought really encapsulated how difficult it's going to be to keep this up, to be consistent without having someone on VAR, more people having 20 VARs looking for one thing. You're looking for dissent. You're looking for fouls. You're looking for kicking the ball away. You're looking for this. You're looking for that. One of them is Liverpool-Newcastle when Trent Alexander-Arnold is yellow carded for kicking the ball away. And then he does a clear foul that's a yellow card offense and does not get a second yellow for it because the referee is like, it's early in the game here. I've made a rod for my own back here. I can't send him off this early.
Yep.
And that's clearly what happened. We know it goes through their heads, and maybe he was right. Like football fans out there might think he was right. I could probably be convinced by someone he was right. In this particular conversation, I'll say he was wrong. Then I go to Arsenal-Fulham. Calvin Bassey gets a yellow card for not taking a goal kick quick enough, which I thought was a bit harsh at the time. And on a yellow card, he does a really stupid foul, quite rightly gets a second yellow and gets sent off. But, Danny, they've both got to be reds or they've both got to be leniency for the tackle. Otherwise, all that's happening here is new rules are making new problems, and new problems are what we're going to focus on and not, the ref had a good game there, because there's going to be more yellows, which obviously means more reds.
Yeah, we've opened up Pandora's box, and it's only going to get more difficult to ascertain what is right and what is wrong, what is similar and what is completely different. And Dale Johnson at ESPN does a fantastic job going through the critical plays and those plays that people feel like there was mistakes being made, and gives clarification on the laws of the game, the application, and how it could be looked at. But again, we're in this giant gray area. As we continue to introduce the applications to the ever-evolving laws of the game, we find ourselves in some really difficult moments. For example, really quick, and I know Tim Horsey wants us to move on at some point. We got a ton of subjects to talk about. Even on Saturday morning at my son Micah's game, the head coach on the opposite side was literally screaming at the top of his lungs at the referee about, I think it was probably 2 to 3 decisions where he didn't know the laws of the game. And he was screaming at the ref that the referee was wrong. And it just continues to happen over and over and over. And it's not just coaches at the youth level, parents at the youth level, fans going to stadiums, pundits misapplying or misinterpreting the current updated laws of the game. At some point, because we're doing this and we've added VAR, we've added this wrinkle of quote unquote true accountability to get the plays correct and minimize the mistakes with minimal interference. Maximum results with minimal interference? Unfortunately for guys like Howard Webb, who started VAR here in Major League Soccer and is now running everything in the Premier League, and when we saw him do the PR campaign with Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, there's going to have to be more of a concerted PR effort to basically show people continuously what the laws of the game are and how they're being applied. Because if you are just going to go backwards and say, sorry, he messed it up, I don't think that's the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is continuing to educate people over and over and over and over what the laws of the game are and how they're being applied. So then people like ourselves, us knuckleheads, and those inside the stadium understand what's happening in real time. Because the pressure, I agree with you. Listen, if we're going to do this thing where we're going to say there's 12 minutes going to be added because we want maximum time of the ball being in played, well, then don't show the yellow cards. Because it's almost like double jeopardy is happening. If you're going to punish someone for saying that they're quote unquote time wasting or delaying the restart of a match, you're already going to add that time on the backside. So get rid of one or the other. Don't add the extra 12 minutes. Keep it around 4 or 5 minutes and then show the yellow cards. But don't do both, because all you're doing is backing yourself into the corner. To your point, if you're going to show an early yellow card, well, then how do we have this conversation about quote unquote leniency for players that are sitting on the yellow card?
If you want some more sweet hardcore data on that, average ball in play time last season after 3 games was 54 minutes 52. This season 58-54. So 4 additional minutes being added of ball in play time in the Premier League this season, thanks to the interpretation of the laws being changed. And average added time last season 8 minutes 27 across 2 halves. This season 11:22. So whatever they're trying to do, it is working. We're getting more ball in play and we're getting more actual football, but we are seeing some potential negative consequences there as well. Hopefully they see it out for the season, A, for consistency, and B, I'm actually really interested to see if this works and changes player behavior. Currently, not at the moment. Maybe if they make an example out of Virgil van Dijk, it might. I want to move on to a game coming up this weekend in the Premier League, and that's Arsenal Man United on Sunday. I want to talk about both those clubs because, Danny, we do this thing on Sirius XM FC, where we both work, of course, in the USA, where we do our Giorgio mug picks and we do our league tables and who's going to win the league and who's going to come second. And it's across the presenting staff and the production staff and a few others as well. Everyone's got both Man United and Arsenal in the top 4. Everyone's got them. Some have got them winning the league. Not me, of course, because Man City exists, but others have picked Arsenal to win the league. And yet, Man United, though they won against Nottingham Forest, there's some monstrous deficiencies in that performance. And for me, a despicable dive from Marcus Rashford as well. Now, I don't want to have that conversation because it is a dive. Everyone knows it is, but it's also state-sanctioned diving, so it's part of the game. It is a penalty, 100%, but it's cheating as well. And that's where I'm going to have to settle on that because I can't have that conversation again. And I'm right. But the overall performance of both teams, and Danny, let's start with Manchester United. I mean, look, Taiwo Awoniyi just ran 60 yards past everybody to score. Onana looks an accident waiting to happen. His goalkeeping for that first goal, Awoniyi sent him back to Italy before finally taking the shot. It was just terrible on his backside goalkeeping, like someone who just got temporarily put in goal at 6-a-side because it's rotation goalies. It's ridiculous how bad that was. And then in the second goal, he just screaming at all of his teammates like he's not sorry, Tim, which would infuriate me if he was my teammate. I don't know how you'd feel about that having lived it, but I'm just not sure I could keep letting this idiot shout at me all the time. As you know, Raphael Varane, I'd probably get you to button your lip a little bit, son, if you're as bad as Onana has been. But then you've got the comeback and then you've got the kind of elation of the whole thing. Something missing, isn't there? I mean, even today, as we record the program, there's the talk about Cucurella potentially coming in, which is hilarious. A £2 million loan fee potentially after a £60 million signing only last year. That's more on Chelsea's mad transfer business, which maybe we'll do next week when the window's closed. But Man United, Danny, just doesn't look right, does it?
I think they have. Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. I think for me, what I wanted to see this season was controlled matches. More control in the match. And by that, I mean not feeling as helter-skelter when the ball's turned over, not feeling like they were collapsing defensively without trying to keep the ball in front of them. I know everything is circumstantial. It's about positioning. It's less about tactics and shape. It's about understanding and identity and who steps and what the subsequent movement is behind. But I felt like this season, with another preseason underneath their belt and the evolution of the squad continuing to change, some come in, some go out, that are to feel more secure. And it hasn't, and it's felt frustrating. I still think the same problems. Take the injuries away from Malacia and Luke Shaw and Mason Mount right now. It's still the same problem. We're still waiting for Højlund to make his debut and try to figure out if he is the real number 9. Anthony Martial has been the same player he's been for the past 6 seasons, where he shows glimpses of being elite in that position, and then also knowing that you can't trust him and or his body after a few matches. And then ultimately, it's this kind of rotating shuffle of trying to figure out where the attacking phase of play and the variation of service and the run and the movement and the patterns and all of these things come into play. So you go from an absolutely horrific dog start, sorry, Tim, to then figuring out a way to win. I watched Ten Hag's presser, and I agreed with him. You point out the negative, which is absolutely how horrid this start is, and how can they be so bad at home, knowing that this is a game where I predicted 3-0. You come out and you got to score goals and put a show on, and this is like the perfect opponent to figure out a way to kind of start the momentum going in your favor. And then you give up 2 goals in the manner in which they did so early. So how do you walk? How do you walk this narrative? The only thing I think for Ten Hag that I've seen is the accountability for player performance. And if you get your chance, you better shine. And if you don't shine, you're not going to play that next game. But I still think he's trying to figure out, because I think I'm as concerned as a lot of Man United fans trying to figure out the Mason Mount acquisition, where he fits. Is it just depth? Is he too similar to Bruno Fernandes? Is he too similar to Christian Eriksen? What this rotating cast of characters look like when you're talking about Garnacho, or you're talking about Sancho, or you're talking about Antony, or you're talking about Marcus Rashford, like where's the dominant force in that phase of play? And then ultimately I think it's just the level is so high for Man City that everybody else is looking at it and saying, like, how can you match that level of consistency? Even when you're playing poorly and you're not dominating in the manner in which, how can you still figure out how to win? Man City's figured that out. I think all the rest of the teams are trying to figure out how to do the same.
Onana, briefly on him. What are you seeing? I'm not saying much.
He's always been reckless. He's always been a reckless goalkeeper. There's nothing that has changed in these 4 or 5 matches that he's played for Manchester United than what he was at Inter Milan or what he was at Ajax. What he was for Cameroon that got him kicked out of the squad for Song. And by the way, Song calls him back in. He's back in Cameroon. He's going to be aggressive off his line. He's going to be super proactive as opposed to reactive. That goal had like where he got put down on his butt. It had like very Fabian Barthez type feel to it. He reminds me a lot of Barthez with kind of his movement and his kind of like how he's off his line. He's throwing his hands up and he's trying to manipulate the game within the game.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good that I think brings to the table, but he will be judged by David De Gea's ability to shot stop, to come out with outrageous saves. And people will say, okay, well, he's got the ball at his feet and he can do things that very few goalkeepers can do because he's calm and he's composed and he can hit this ball and he can play out of the back and he can bring an element to the game that Ten Hag wants in his side. But at the same time, there's going to be these reckless moments where he's going to cost Manchester United points because of who he is and how he interprets how to play the game.
I think there's a few question marks right now about Erik Ten Hag, mainly because this window, something we discussed a couple of weeks ago when the transfer window looked like it was going well for Manchester United. It was all about the fact that Erik Ten Hag, for me at least, was given such a vote of confidence by those at Manchester United for what was achieved last season, Champions League qualification and the Moose Cup 1. He was obviously given a lot of say in who the transfers are, who we buy, how we play, and judging by those that have come in and judging by the holes that remain in the squad, judging by the kind of humiliating exit of David De Gea from Manchester United, really, I think there's a lot of things that haven't been as well handled as maybe they could have been.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
Can I add one more quick one to it? I don't want to say he's been undone by the club, but by not moving Harry Maguire out of the team, and this isn't like a Harry Maguire thing, this is more like big picture. You got yourself out of Cristiano Ronaldo and what the locker room dynamic was and what the wages look like for the club that they were underneath. I just wonder now that the window is about to close, if they're looking back saying, man, we should just take it on the chin. We should just egotistically eat some of the money that we know we're going to lose just to make sure we can move on, because it's an unnecessary distraction that both the manager and now the club still have to deal with, because you're talking about a starting England international center back.
Well, as well, in retrospect, I do think a lot of the praise for Erik Ten Hag over the Ronaldo situation, I think it should be looked at in the light of the despicable government of Saudi Arabia and their attempt to buy all sport and sports wash their reputation globally for whatever nefarious ends it ends up being, because Saudi Arabia has basically been a kind of backdoor for the super clubs to get rid of players they wanted. And if they didn't want Cristiano Ronaldo and they didn't want to take him there, what was left? Kansas City? That weren't going to happen. So
I think it was, anyway. By the way, I think it was closer than you're giving it credit for.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Sure. in the eyes of those in Kansas City until literally anyone else wanted him. Well, he's gone to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, so I want to move on to Arsenal, though, briefly, because they face each other this weekend. And I just love your view on this, because I am so biased at this point that I actually don't know if I can form a different opinion on Kai Havertz. And so I'd love you to try, because Kai Havertz is a bit like, someone. Ask anyone listening to this, if you're in America, what are your views on, like, Donald Trump, right? For example.
Oh, boy,
everyone,
don't do that.
No, but if you did, everyone has an opinion. No one's going to say, oh, I don't have any thoughts on him, right? And this is the same with Kai Havertz at this point. I don't think you go to any football fan, soccer fan, and say, hi, soccer fan, what are your thoughts on Kai Havertz? And I don't really know. Like, most people will say crap. Others will say, oh, I hear he's mercurial. And that's kind of it, right? And I watched Arsenal this weekend against Fulham, really labour against Fulham. Even when they were down to 10, I thought João Palhinha was the best player on the field and might look good alongside Declan Rice in their midfield, but I don't want to upset Fulham fans on that. But you're watching him and you think, like, we had this chat before, Arsenal ain't going to win the league until they have someone like Erling Haaland up front. And if you can't get Erling Haaland, who's a 30-goal-a-year striker, and a 20-goal-a-year striker with the two other forwards getting 15 each. You do that, you've got to score 80-plus goals to win the Premier League, and someone's probably got to score 25 to 30, right? That's more or less what happens every time someone wins the league. The top scorer, or one of the top 3 top scorers, comes from that. Salah, Haaland, Aguero over recent years. Henry for Arsenal is a great example for them. They ain't got that. And they decided, Danny, to spend a sizable amount of their summer budget on this guy who, look, my opinion is set in stone. I think he's a really talented footballer, be amazing at beach football. I have no idea what he does in an 11-a-side team. I have no idea what his position is. If he's going to be number 10, no one plays number 10. Get a time machine if you want to be a number 10 in football now. So what's he doing there? And, even to the point this weekend that Jesus coming back from injury, so he's on the bench, and Nketiah gets dropped to go to the bench. They don't play a striker against Fulham. Trossard's part of a front 3. So if Trossard's going to... So where's Havertz? And it doesn't make sense to me. And every time I watch him, I think, what is he doing here? So are you any clearer?
I want to be very clear. I think he's a very, very, very good player. I really do. I think Kai Havertz is a very, very good player. But I don't know what his best position is. I remember doing Europa League coverage for Bayer Leverkusen, and this precocious 16, 17-year-old midfielder was playing as a 0.9. He was playing underneath. He was playing as a 10. He was playing on like the right-hand side underneath. And I remember when he went to Chelsea, God, I wish I could remember the Chelsea Twitter handle that was just slagging me off when I said, I'm not sure how he fits. I'm not sure what his best position is. I'm not sure if he's going to provide you enough goals to be your quote unquote starting number 9. I don't know if he's going to provide you enough goals and assists to be kind of this hybrid of a 10 that you have to build around. And where I think Havertz, his link-up play is the pass before the pass that leads to the assist and the goal. I think any of those phases, right? The 3 passes that lead to the goal, I think you'll see him involved in when a team scores a goal. But beyond that, I think the challenge is to continue to integrate him into a system that gets the best out of him. And I'm not sure who exactly has gotten the best out of him. I think he averages, a goal every 4 games when you're talking about his time at Chelsea, somewhere around there. So what does this look like for Mikel Arteta? I'll tell you, for Arteta, Declan Rice and Odegaard makes him a better player. There's no doubt about that. You throw Martinelli, you throw Saka. When Gabby Jesus is healthy, I think when you throw Trossard in the mix, even though Trossard's probably, maybe we could argue, could he be competing with Kai Havertz in that attacking midfield position? Whatever happened to Smith Rowe? I'm just throwing that out there. But there's real questions, because I think he is going to be as divisive of a player for Arsenal as he was for Chelsea fans.
Yeah.
I think everybody recognizes he's good.
Yeah.
But how does he become great? And that's going to be the challenge for Arteta, because as of right now, it seems more of a struggle to find the levels of consistency that's expected for a player of his profile, of his cost, of his level.
Yeah, it just sort of feels like he's black truffle and you're serving, I don't know, hamburgers, or it's a fancy cheese, but I wanted cheddar. You know, just like the match isn't right. Like, oh, I've got pasta. What are you serving it with? Porridge. Like, just just there's something, and I love both those things. The fit isn't right. I could keep doing it. We've got to move on because it's time. It's time, guy. Let's talk about the old hammy hams. So West Ham going into this season, if you are a Athletic subscriber or on the internet, 8% hope at the start of the season, the lowest amount of hope for any fan asked a question on the hopeometer. Beat Chelsea last week in a terrific top 6, other 14 sort of matchup. Rope-a-dope a bit, score goals when you can. Went to Brighton. Now, they hadn't beaten Brighton, for those that missed this, since 2012. The bowling ground still stood. Ricardo Vazte scored a hat-trick. Sam Allardyce was West Ham manager, and they went on to beat Blackpool in the playoff final a few days later. Since then, they'd found all sorts of crazy ways to lose against Brighton and Hove Albion or draw against Brighton. And in fact, it was a loss against Brighton last game of the previous season, which meant West Ham were in the Conference League to go on to win it, because if they'd have won it, they'd have been in the Europa League. So in many ways, thanks, Brighton. This weekend and last week, Danny, there's been... I got a lot of grief about it because people don't listen to the things that I'm saying to them. But so I'll say it again now. I think that David Moyes probably would have got sacked at any other club in the Premier League November last year and January through March last year. Any other club. Because the football was diabolical. The losses were mounting up. In the end last season, they lost over half of their games. They were really, really bad. And you couple that with the signings of the dearly departed Scamacca, Lucas Paqueta, having Declan Rice, Europa League semi-finalist, really good squad. And you're suddenly knocking about with Everton and Leeds. And you're a bit like, oh, something's gone wrong here. And I think there was a legitimate claim that he was spent. He was finished. It wasn't happening for him, right? There's this whole narrative they tried to play more football last season. I never really saw that, but I think they were trying to do something that wasn't working. In the end, they went back to the old ways, hit teams on the counter, soak up the pressure, get the win. It's how they won the Conference League final. But there was a sort of lack of motivation, maybe, or a lack of fitness or sharpness. I don't know what was missing last year. But I'll tell you what, it's back right now. What we saw at this weekend, Danny, was what we saw for 2 years under David Moyes when they came 6th and 7th. We saw high levels of motivation from the players, closing down spaces where previously they'd sat off so much last season. A lot of tackles going in. Very strong central structure block with sometimes 7 or 8 players in it. Force the team wide. Don't let them through. Make them shoot from distance. And then when you get the ball, don't try and keep it. Don't mess around. Get it up there as quick as possible. Find a way to release Jarrod Bowen and score. And it was an incredible performance. It was perfect David Moyes West Ham football. That is what he almost perfected for 2 years. Not really seeing much of the ball, but looking incredibly threatening on the break. Built around Bowen, built around Antonio. Great cameo from Benrahma when he came on. And, you know, you lose Declan Rice, catastrophic loss. I don't think they fully planned this out, but James Ward-Prowse has been incredible. Welcome to Set Piece FC, James. And also Edson Alvarez, you know, the player Tyler Adams wishes he was, looked like he'd been there forever. A couple of turns in the penalty area, 2 players around him. And Brighton played really well. Brighton were, again, as ever, incredible to watch. But you have to beat West Ham at the moment as opposed to roll them over. And I love football like that. And it's why I was so on board the Moyes train for 2.5 years, why I'm eager to get back on, but also don't apologise for saying he probably could have gone for 4 or 5 months last season because it really was bad, and I wasn't sure he was going to get it back.
Well, and we were wondering who would be available to be an upgrade for the squad that the team had at that moment, knowing that the owners weren't really willing to make decisions, tough decisions, and or spend money to buy people off. See Brendan Rodgers at Leicester City until it was too late. Here's the: are we just not going to acknowledge that you guys signed a bum center back that's injured and not going to be available for another month? Are we just going to gloss that over?
Who?
The one that had the metal bolts coming out of his neck, Mavropanos.
The 4th choice centre back.
Did you say who? You said who on the center back, the starting center back that you guys signed? Okay.
He's not. Can I just add that he's not the starting centre back? The starting centre backs are Aguirre and Zuma, and he comes in as number 3.
Okay.
And Ogbonna's number 4, and Tilo Kehrer, I think, still exists.
Oh, I was just wondering. Yeah, just because you guys were celebrating him there for a second, so I just wanted to understand.
Who was?
You
what guys?
You guys. We could show Snapchats later. Anyways, you like Edson Alvarez, huh?
Yeah, he looked good. Good player.
Good player.
Yeah.
Good player. I thought you'd like him. Yeah, listen. The start of the season, as of Saturday, we're top of the table. Look at us. Top of the table. You sound like Aston Villa fans a couple of years ago with Jack Grealish. Anyways, so you're going to smash Luton, right? You smashed Luton. Just quick reminder. Looks at dates September 16th, return from the international break. West Ham at home against Man City. Looks at date Sunday, September 24th. West Ham at Liverpool Football Club. Looks at date September 30th. Winnable game at home against Sheffield United. And then the final game before the October international window, West Ham at home against Newcastle.
Yeah, tough games, but they've got 7 points already when we all thought we'd get none.
I'm not saying they're going to be relegated. I'm not saying they're going to be relegated.
Points. They've literally got 7 points.
I'm not saying they're going to be relegated. I'm not saying they're going to be relegated. I just want to remind you, if you will, of a certain young man who started the show that says, I don't judge my West Ham Hammers until 10 games into the season.
Unless you're top for a night.
That's going to be a lot closer.
Then enjoy it. Then you can enjoy it. I want to talk about James Maddison briefly because I love James Maddison. You know this. I think he's incredible. I think there are very few players that are like James Maddison.
Good player.
I think his eye for a pass is spectacular. You know, there was a point last season where I went to so many games, and look, they are probably West Ham games more often than not. But I remember seeing a through ball and going, "Oh, it's a through ball, right? Cool," because I hadn't seen one for so long. And
up, back, side.
Yes, left, right, shuffle, so check. But James Maddison, I mean, he don't give a toss about left and right. Every time he gets it done, on the half turn, facing forward, running behind somebody, he is always looking to receive the ball and then put it forward into a space that someone can run onto. And, you know, when Tottenham lost Harry Kane last week or the week before, whenever it was, looks like he's doing pretty well in Germany, by the way. There was no way of knowing. It could have been bloody depressing for every Tottenham fan. I always talk about this. My brother-in-law is a big Tottenham fan. And he was delighted about Harry Kane going because he was fed up of the constant, endless negativity of the transfer cycle. It's so draining when a player you love or you want to keep is being linked with a move away for years and years and years. You can't even, like, I hate commentators who do this. Goal for Harry Kane for Tottenham. Could it be his last? Like, I hate that because who's the goal for? The goal is for the Tottenham fans. So, you know, don't do it in the goal, please. I think it's just, this is pointless and just angers everyone. You're riling them up when you're trying to make them like you. I think it's odd. You're taking it away from them. But he's finally gone. It could have been all doom and gloom. No, there's a relief about Harry Kane going. You've got this incredible character of Ange Postecoglou. I don't know if you saw this, folks. Gary Neville said something along the lines of everyone's copying Pep. He goes on TNT Sports after the Bournemouth game and says, nah, mate, I was just copying Pep, wasn't I? Which was incredible. That's Australian, that accent. And you got him, but also James Maddison. Great goal this weekend. And there's just, Dunny, this whole thing about it could have been awful. It could have been such doom and gloom. But I tell you what, the Bournemouth game this weekend, I think Spurs are the team you want to be watching in the Premier League right now. There is a freedom and a fun and an organisation to them that I think we'd be wrong to be sleeping on them this season.
I think James Maddison is going to make them significantly better, especially in that playmaker role, sitting deep, pushing through, hitting balls that not a lot of people can hit on this team. And I think when you're talking about the health of the roster and the evolution of the roster, Kulusevski, Son, I'm interested to see the continued integration of Lo Celso in this conversation, but you throw Betancourt in this, all of this. Good news, right? It's a feel-good factor. God, I got to deal with Headley and Gabe Ortiz on text messages, and it's just, I call it Tottenham lunacy. Tottenham lunacy. This is their year. The kangaroo pouch.
But they're not going to think that, though, are they? They're not going to think that anymore. Well, they just want to have fun. Spurs just want to have fun. Make that a chant.
I don't think so. I still think for Tottenham fans that they have aspirations. Listen, this is what's happened. Pochettino, I think, changed the elevation of expectation and hope for Tottenham. And I think what we've seen is every single subsequent move has been, can we get the shiny object that's proven? With the exception of Nuno. When you go for Jose or you go for Conte, now with this move, what it does is you take a relatively quote unquote unproven player at the manager at the highest level, you drop him into the Premier League, you see what his success in Japan and in Scotland, that could then be translated to the Premier League with a group of players that are really good, but at the same time, dealing with the loss of a generational striker, a generational footballer that's not just generational striker footballer at the highest level. It is Tottenham through and through, right? This is a Tottenham. Well, as much as we want to downplay it, it's different, right, than it is for like a Benzema. It's different than a Lewandowski. This is, it's different than an Erling Haaland. These are the players that he's been similar to over the years.
No, I was just doing the little hand gesture for those that were listening on the podcast, because he did wear that Arsenal shirt and go to Highbury and watch the Gunners. So he's not Tottenham through and through until he was like 18. But well,
so it is. Yeah, so it is what it is. I mean, he's not Lewis Hamilton. Anyways, at the end of the day, I still think they have a major problem. And that is Richarlison is going to be questioned over and over and over. Can he, number one, score goals? No. And then ultimately, I'm intrigued to see how I'll call them antics, the game within the game, and I love dark arts, how the antics play for Tottenham. Because the antics played well with Everton, because it was always the underdog. It was me versus you. It was all that stuff. Yeah. But I just think it's a different level that he's at. And now comes expectations as well as the pressure to fulfill not only the scoring duty, but kind of the persona, the leadership aspect, all of this. Because for
Tottenham's number 9. Beat Tottenham's number 9. Yeah.
Well, because that was never Harry Kane could play the game within the game, right? But it was never to the point where there was like a show. And I think with Richarlison, I love the show. I'm here for the show, but I'm intrigued to see how that's observed by a Tottenham fan base that isn't used to seeing a player in that position doing what he does. He's, at the end of the day, if you score goals, that type of personality will be exalted to the moon and back. They will be, that'll be a love affair that no one can deny, but you got to score the goals.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be the pressure.
If you don't, you become a cult hero, which basically means you weren't good, but you were a character. I mean, there was two things. One, the chance he missed. I mean, I couldn't believe he didn't score it. And then later in the game, he miscontrols a ball and then hacks someone down and gets booked and substituted. So it wasn't great from Richarlison, but we will see. I also wanted to briefly mention, actually, two things on this game. Does Robbie Williams translate to America? Do you know who that is? Robbie Williams?
Yeah, I know Robbie Williams. Yeah.
So
played at his house in LA one time.
Of course. You know,
field.
yes. So Robbie Williams is a big pop star, huge pop star in England and around Europe, less so in America, but he has had some hits in America, and he lived in LA for quite a long time. And Dunny played. So was he Hollywood FC? Was that what you played with?
No. He had been involved with Hollywood FC, but then Hollywood United, but then he kind of did his own thing. He and Vinny kind of went off and did their own thing, but a huge
football fan, and not a Tottenham
pickup
fan.
Games, legendary pickup games.
Preston, I think, is his club, isn't it? Preston North End. Anyway, he had a massive. He's got a big, popular back catalogue in the UK and across Europe, but his biggest hit is a song called Angels. So do you know Angels? The song Angels?
Yeah.
So this makes the whole thing worthwhile, is that Spurs are now doing a song about Ange Postecoglou to the theme of Angels, which has now been sung in a tour bus by Robbie Williams, which is doing the round on social media. We're probably going to play it on Tidbits on Friday on Grumpy Pundit, so do join us for that. I'm sure you've heard it already, but we're going to talk about it on the show too on Sirius XMFC. So often when I sing in this microphone on these calls, it doesn't quite come out. So this might not come out. So we'll see what happens. But I might speak it a bit, so you can definitely hear it. But the lyrics are just, I don't know who writes these things, but whoever did it, I want them to have the credit, because it is, as Danny might say, spectacular. Okay. I won't sing, actually, because you won't be able to hear it. It won't come out. And through it all, we play the way we want to, with big Ange Postecoglou. Whether I'm right or wrong, it's big Ange ball. Big solo. So you can keep your Pochettino, Conte and Mourinho, and even Christian Gross. Everywhere we go, We're loving Big Ange instead, which is Angels instead. It's so good. It's the best chant since the Frank Lampard "Stop Crying Your Heart Out" one. I love it. I love it when fans do this, Danny.
Yeah, it really is brilliant. I've every time I've gone to either a Premier League game or a championship game, to be in the stadium and not be aware of when certain songs start to pop up and start going. And then you're like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
It's tricky. Little tricky little foxes, you coming up with something good. So the love affair is in full swing with Big Ange, and we'll see how he continues to not only assimilate to the Premier League, but I think culturally how the fans and the media and the pundits assimilate to him as well.
Two other quick bits before we're out of time. I did just want to mention Andoni Iraola, who I don't know Andoni Iraola that well. He's the Bournemouth manager, once of Rayo Vallecano, led them to the dizzy heights of 11th. But what I do dislike is, how to put this where they might hear it. No, there's a niche football world right now of people who think they know better than other people. And it's like, oh, but you haven't heard about this manager, have you? You haven't heard. He's like the niche football fan favorite manager. And last year he's been linked with Wolves and all this sort of stuff. And Gary O'Neill, I do know Gary, worked with us at Premier League Live. So I have got skin in the game on it because I like Gary and I like Sean Derry, who's gone to Wolves as well. But
Jordan Murphy. Yeah,
maybe a bit. Yeah. But so again, I put my bias on the table when I say this, but I watched this Bournemouth team and I've watched 2 of their 3 games, the West Ham game and this one. And I thought, they're all over the place. They're all over the place. Like this, I'm going to come over and do my Rayo Vallecano niche thing that some Spanish podcast that does, niche La Liga references and talks about him being the next big thing. And Andoni Iraola is no better than Gary O'Neill as a manager. Like he might have a bit more of an understandable ethos in what he's done at Bournemouth. And I hope it does work out in the long run. But watching it right now, like watching the way he managed that game, he looks like a full-on rookie. Sorry, Tim. And Bournemouth are going to be in massive trouble this year. Everyone's lucky they're the worst promoted teams maybe in the last 30 years. Or everyone's lucky they exist. But he's come in and he's doing this ridiculous, like high press against Tottenham, which is what Tottenham desperately wanted to do. They start getting back in the game and he's like, right, I've got to have a say now because I'm Andoni Iraola, super coach. And he takes off Antoine Semenyo, who was the best player on the field for Bournemouth, brings on someone else who offered nothing. He took off Justin Kluivert to bring on someone else. He's just doing things because that's what you do on Championship Manager. And that's what you do if you're data mining stuff. Anyone who watched the game goes, he's the best player. Don't take him off. But because he had it in his mind in some plan and some binder and some iPad subfolder that he was going to do it, he'd done it. And I'm just watching it thinking, Gary O'Neill deserved Bournemouth this year for what he did.
I agree.
Did you brought in this guy because some niche podcaster told you he was good? It annoys me.
There's only one solution for this, right? You know what the solution is.
Hit me.
Tyler Adams.
Alex Scott.
Tyler Adams.
Yeah.
That's the solution. That's the solution.
Yeah.
He's on his way.
Yeah. Messi Watch, what can you tell me?
11 goals in 9 matches. Did it again. Invents a passing lane that should not been invented. It didn't start the game. Came off the bench with Sergio Busquets about 60 minutes remaining. Credit to Tata Martino because the way that the rosters evolved outside of just Jordi Alba, Busquets, and Lionel Messi, that Tata Martinez has a plan for and without Lionel Messi. To be able to go to the New York Red Bulls in terms of the way that they press, the way that they play, especially at home, quite the statement for those 60 minutes before Lionel Messi gets on the field for the players that were given the opportunity. And then Messi comes on, he's just got a different level. And if you go back, and I highly suggest if you haven't watched the goal that he scores, it's a simple tap in at the end of the day. But from the buildup from Busquets to find Jordi Alba, who somehow does this like freakish, like half bicycle kick to knock the ball into Lionel Messi, who then has 2 collapsing defenders, and he does the left foot chop to get it back to his right foot instead. It's just like almost a flat line with Benjamin Kramaski coming super deep, probably 5 yards behind the outside left back, John Tolkien, that Messi sees it, but Kramaski doesn't see it. But Messi actually hits it with the outside of his left foot, turns his body away, invents a passing lane literally out of nothing to where Kramaski's got the speed to get across to beat Tolkien. Tolkien can't knock it down. And if you watch the movement, and we're doing this thing now where we're saying, oh, MLS defenders, like, please just go watch any of the goals. Go watch the highlights that Lionel Messi has scored over the course of his career and just be honest about the defending that you're watching when he scores goals, and then try to apply it to what you're seeing now in Major League Soccer. Because I think it's just doing, it's low hanging fruit. It's doing a disservice to the quality of what Lionel Messi is capable of doing. That pass and that movement, how he makes three players look like standing cones, and he uses their momentum of pressing against them as he literally arcs his body and he goes low momentum, low center of gravity, and bursts through. Kremasky gets across, it's tap in. I mean, it is an extraordinary buildup. Just from Busquets to Alba to Messi to Kremasky to the tap in. I mean, it is really high level goal scoring opportunities. So fun to watch from an outsider looking in. Obviously, I have skin in the game with calling games for Apple, but every single time, Bretos and I are literally like giggling at how he's capable of scoring some of these goals, because you would think at this point, like maybe there's a dry spell in the future. There inevitably has to be a dry spell in the future. They're going to have to play without him when he goes away for Argentina during the international break. I believe it's at home against Sporting Kansas City. But I think there's a statement of intent. I do think they make the playoffs. I just don't see how they can't capitalize on this momentum and this roster build. We say it's Messi, but it's Messi and company right now. That's that I think is, with 3 games in hand, one of those games without Lionel Messi away with Argentina. I just don't see how they don't continue to climb the Eastern Conference, because everyone will say, well, there's only so many games left. But inevitably, teams are going to struggle. Teams are going to score, start to win. They're just, whatever he's doing right now, they've just got to continue to do, because he's an extraordinary run of form. And Miami's a completely different team than they were before the start of the Leagues Cup.
I wonder how many people went home when he wasn't in the starting lineup. I wonder. I'd love to do the data mining on that, but sadly.
By the way, did you see they put the game up at Times Square?
Yes, I did see that. Yeah,
they put the game, and literally Times Square, just the amount of people that were standing around, just looking up, watching it. I mean, even when he wasn't on the field, people were just waiting for him to come on. There's Messi mania happening right now. It is a. I don't think anyone realized the amount of casual eyeballs he was going to bring to the table. And I saw some number, and I don't know if this number is true or not. And I heard some people talk about it. But if it's true that the Philadelphia Union, for example, made $8 million on Lionel Messi coming, I know here in Salt Lake, they could have had the opportunity to host Lionel Messi in the U.S. Open, in Inter Miami in the U.S. Open Cup final. They ended up losing in added time or extra time, whatever we're calling it nowadays, on the road at Houston. But the conversation swirl around Real Salt Lake was they lost out on potentially $8 to $12 million by not being able to host the U.S. Open Cup final. So that's the type of money that's floating around Inter Miami and Lionel Messi right now.
We'll continue to watch Messi Mania out in MLS. And of course, Brian Dunny Dunseth will be covering a whole bunch of games for Apple coming up. Any plugs as to where you're going to be? Do you know where you're going to be? Where are you now?
I'm actually on Wednesday. I am on the road at St. Louis. So St. Louis, one of the best environments in Major League Soccer. They are taking on FC Dallas. So here we go. The run up to the playoffs. Who's good enough? Who struggles? Who's got momentum? Who starts to fall away? And we'll see what adjustments need to be made. But St. Louis is an expansion team, top of the Western Conference as of right now.
And I'll be doing Brighton Newcastle on Saturday for Premier League Live. I'll also be attending Arsenal Man United on Sunday, which should be a cracker as well. We're going to look back at all that stuff on next week's Week in the Tackle. For that is the podcast you are listening to. That is Brian Dunseth. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program. Sorry, Tim. We'll see you next time.